Before I start asking Golrokh a few questions, I want to say something about how we met, actually. And after Golrokh, because I mean her work has many different facets. We can't go into that now, but I mean everything now today. But I want to open up the floor for people to ask questions about heritage and preserving digital culture to Golrokh herself. So a few words before asking a few questions to Golrokh. So I grew up in the Netherlands as an Iranian, born in Iran. And like many people, going back to your ancestral identity or your immigration identity, it has phases, up and down. But in 2009, after the protests in Iran, many Iranian diaspora, they connected back with Iran, and that happened through digital media, Twitter, Facebook. And at the same time, people were going back and forth for a long time, but it intensified in those years from Iran to Europe and North America. And Golrokh was one of those people who lived in Tehran, but happened to come to Delft, of all places. So I, at the time, lived in Delft, so we met. And she made many drawings that were related to social movements, protests in Iran, but also in many other countries. Now, today we're going to discuss some of her more recent work, and the oldest work that we're going to talk about is a drawing she made for the English page of the Egyptian We Are All Khaled Said, the Facebook page. And this drawing became the profile picture during the Egyptian revolution, which is interesting because Golrokh is an Iranian who was in Holland and in Tehran. So how did her drawing end up there? Just to show you a few more things, Golrokh, we printed out some of your drawings as you requested, the author's intention, to spread them here. This is a more recent one. Take your dark flag away, we will stay here. This is about the Kurdish resistance among others, to the Islamic State. And here another drawing. This is about the children who were shot at a beach in Gaza. I think this is one of Golrokh's strong images. Now, she asked us not to project these on the screen full size. So Golrokh, maybe in a bit you can explain why not. But she asked us to show how these images are actually used by people themselves. So what happens is people get these images from Facebook and they print them out and they go to a protest, for example, right? Now, here at the museum, we have posters made in Iran in the Iran-Iraq war period. Now, we could collect posters today as well, right? But just collecting posters wouldn't capture how these digital media are impacting these societies today. And by the way, for us, that was the first experience. It was 2009. Now, having said that, Golrokh, can we maybe hear from you where you made that drawing that was used for the Egyptian page, and how did it end up there?
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hope that you hear my voice with a good quality. And Puyan asked that why I didn't want to be in Skype with video. I think that the first reason is bad connection of internet, because usually it has kind of you cannot really continue the conversation on Skype, but we can also make kind of poetic reason for that. I think it grows your imagination, but not by not seeing me. So that's a good excuse. Um, yeah, you asked me about the drawing for Egyptian revolution. Yeah, did you ask?
Yes, yes.
But
The
your
one with the
question was,
dreams come true.
yeah, and your question was, how did I draw that, or did you ask this?
Well, yeah, where did you draw it and how did it end up on that Facebook page?
Uh, um, I really don't know how did it end up there, but I did draw that drawing in Amsterdam. I think it was 4 years ago. I was studying art in Rietveld Academy at the time. Yeah, basically that's our question when we do something for kind of big events. We never know how does it go and how does it
There it is.
end up somewhere. But I think when everybody participates in a momentum like Egyptian revolution, this happens quite fast. And I guess someone saw it somewhere, maybe in my page, and then he sent it to this We Are All Khaled Said page, and they used it.
Right.
Yeah, it was quite fast events, no? And the thing is, it was I think 3 days before revolution actually become victorious. So it was the time that I think it was the worst time of revolution. People were on the square, and there was this possibility that lots of people die, or basically the dreams didn't come true at the moment. But I thought that this is the perfect time to just imagine what will happen if they will make a huge celebration in Tahrir Square.
Right. So, but then, I mean, we are today interested in the question of preservation, right? So, should
Yes.
museums preserve these kind of images? Looking in hindsight, what do you think about that? I mean, I know you are quite critical of a museum taking this as a poster and saving it in some archive. What's your view on that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for sure we have to save something from that time, and my works are like similar as other like memories of those protests, and for sure we have to keep something from that time, and for sure we have to remember. But what shall we remember is quite big question, and we constantly ask ourselves that what shall we keep from those moments and those moments of brotherhood. But what I like to keep from my works and what I like to see in the future, like saving by my works, is to see a momentum which ordinary people do something extraordinary. And I think this is something that we have to keep for the future, that to remember that these were totally ordinary people, that they just decided to do something extraordinary
Right.
for
So,
a special moment.
well, so we have now on the screen one of your favorite pictures of the. I think he's an Egyptian man holding your drawing, and he actually looks like the drawing.
Yeah, with the same mustache.
Yeah, the guy
Typical
with the
Egyptian
mustache.
man.
So this is ordinary. These are ordinary people, as you said.
Yeah, yeah.
So what do you think? Should the museum collect the image of this ordinary man holding your drawing, or in order to teach about, for example, transnational connections during that period, because this was a period where you are in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Someone in Egypt or someone in Tehran or New York is looking at these images. What is your view on that?
Yeah, for sure, the thing which museum or other institution has to keep from those moments are people's participation. And I think, of course, about this work also, the picture of a guy who is holding my work is amplifying what I wanted to say. So in that sense, it's much more important than the work itself. And yeah, it can show much more about that time compared to my work itself.
Right. So what do you do with the originals? Because you draw them and then you scan them, right?
Yeah. Usually I draw with pencil and pen, and then I scan them and I color them by computer. But basically the reason is to do something fast. Like I prefer to make all of them only with pen and pencil, but usually because there is no time, you go for digital facilities.
Right.
Yeah, other softwares.
Okay, so maybe we can have a first question from the audience. Oh, yeah? Yes.
Hi, this is Shiloh.
Hello.
Thank you so much for your explanation. I'm really curious about what you said about amplifying the originals, because this, another word maybe for amplifying would be augmentation, or sort of a virtual self. And this is in some way quite interesting to the idea of images performing and being alive and going on beyond your intentions. I'm really curious about this sort of the ability of the images you make to perform in different contexts, and how you see that, and maybe if you think it gets out of control sometimes, or something happens that you don't want to with the images.
What I like in general about the circulation of my works is that usually people feel free to change my works. Like, for instance, they add another sentence to an illustration, and they put the date of protest, for instance. And I think it's exactly about amplifying. And when you want to change something and you have a clear cause and you go to the street for that cause, you have the power of change. So it doesn't matter about my illustration or something else. You just add your wish and your aim to someone else's imagination. And people do this with my work all the time. And I think because there is no signature, people feel free to take it and customize it for themselves. And I think maybe museum and other institutions, they also can do such a role for amplifying something. But I think that the core of that action usually is to have same cause for change. You know, if you have same reason for going to the street or drawing or something else, then you can amplify someone else's action.
Can I maybe, I want to follow up on that, Golrokh, because you, obviously, as an activist, you're interested in activism. So no, I think a good example of where you as an author disappeared is where some of your drawings were printed on money, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
circulated widely, but nobody really knew where they came from.
Yeah.
But what about, for example, drawings that you as an activist might think are not so relevant, but we as a museum might think they are relevant? So, for example, you have drawings of your life in the Netherlands as a migrant.
Yeah.
For a museum in the Netherlands, although it's not directly about, you know, activism, it could be very interesting. So there again, you as an artist may become important for us. What about those kind of drawings?
Yeah, as you know, Puyan, I've studied art for 4 years, and for more than 4 years, I had this question that how art institution can do something more than only selecting works based on like qualification in art and art theory. And it's quite, especially in Amsterdam, it was quite big question that how art and politics can be more connected and participate in each other's context. But for me, this is still a question that because like the qualification of museum and art scene never became as important as that social political cause for me. So as a consequence of my works, I can see some museum to choose my other works based on how you call it, based on social acceptance through my other works, but it's only consequence of other action. So I really don't know about this art institution qualification about my drawing, or which one is more important than which one.
Mm-hmm. So maybe one more question from the audience. Yes.
Yes, I was wondering if you kept track of how often your drawings have been used, shared, printed, because we're looking at pictures here on the screen of different cities, but it's completely unclear what time span we're talking about and how widespread the use of these images is. So could you give some insight into that?
I did try several times to keep the trace, but it's almost impossible, especially about the works which are related to other countries and other languages. Like, for instance, about Kurdistan, my works were perfectly distributed in Turkish networks of activists. And it's totally different dynamic compared to the news. For instance, those Turkish activists, they were super active to distribute all of these pro-Kurdish illustration and posters and propagandas. So I couldn't really reach all of them because I could not read Turkish. And also about other Arab countries, when it goes to language boundaries, I cannot really trace my works, but I receive sometimes just messages from someone. For instance, in Erbil, I got an email from a woman in Erbil who said, I'm in Ministry of Women in Kurdish part of Iraq, and I want to print your work in a big size, so I need a better quality. But that was only random message that I really don't know how did she find my email. But usually I cannot really trace my works because it goes to totally different networks. And I even don't know like friends of friends who liked that image somewhere in some page. But of course I would like to document that and somehow see the trace. But I think all of social networks are quite unable to trace the work, especially trace the image.
So, Golrokh, a question about the influence of propaganda art on your art. You say that you don't know where these works are going, but they are somehow disseminated among certain groups. And you've once said to me that the style of your drawings is heavily influenced by Iranian styles that you grew up with. So, in what way is this propaganda or maybe a naive-ish quality of these drawings related to your wish for ordinary people to use them?
Yeah, I think anyway I grew up after revolution, and the common aesthetic of whole visual world around us were based on kind of propaganda, but that propaganda had kind of the same simple childish reference as well, because this generation, my generation, children of revolution, were quite huge generation. And of course we were participating in all of these different ceremonies of revolution and ceremonies of different huge like social events. And by that we somehow we have created a style together which is kind of childish, simple way of drawing. But of course there are some personal touch on those works. But I think the aim which I follow is to draw or visualize a minimum common consensus between lots of people. So I think the reason makes it also more simple and childish, because I want to talk about the main agreements that we have made so far. So that's make it quite simple. And it's not really complicated visual language. It's direct and simple and childish.
Another question from the audience. Yes.
Hi, I'm Katja. We are just circulating some of your posters here, and having them in hand, I really feel that there is also something to that material quality of these posters, and I'm wondering if you can talk a bit about the relation of like the physical public sphere where they are used and their circulation in the digital public sphere. So is there a kind of hierarchy for you? Is in the end it for you more important? Do you think they have more impact when people really carry them in the streets, or do you see at least the same importance for all the circulation in the social networks?
Yeah, definitely. I think social networks are never as strong as public space, and social networks are only extra addition to public space. And when my work goes to public space, that's a moment that my work has a voice, actually. But of course, social networks make it much more possible and much more easy for us nowadays to just suddenly appear somewhere far with our works. But I just look at it as an extra, not as a replacement for public space. And I think nowadays people have printers in their home, and they have possibility of making things like printing things from a digital world. And sometimes people add their own opinion and taste by printing things and adding things or cutting around the poster. Or I think that's also kind of possibility for people to add what they want to say. And you see, for instance, in Rainy Day, how people cover the work by plastic. And I think all of these details, all of these small action also are kind of participation, that people actually have clear political agenda behind all of them.
Another question. Not yet?
Ask a question.
Yes.
Thanks. I was wondering, also going further on the last question, if we think about collecting your works, you would say the plastic is adding towards my work, the community is adding towards my work, the social networks are. How do you think about collecting your work? Where does the object end? Could you elaborate on
Puyan,
it?
I couldn't hear
Okay, I'll
voice.
repeat it.
Can you just repeat the question?
Repeat it. The question is, where does the object end? So if you think about collecting, right, and you're mentioning all these details, and think about not just art museums, but also ethnographic museums. Where does the object end? What should be collected?
Yeah, actually, I think this is really great question, because I have asked myself maybe thousands of times during studying art, that how can we capture or exhibit or document participation? Like how, because the moment of participation is totally individual decision. There is an individual decision behind every single action that people do. And how can we document this collective action, but also by keeping these details of participation? And I said this because it still is my question. And that's why when I talked with Lisa, I said, I only can document and remember these actions by creating new participation. And as you said, where this object ends, I think if we want to keep the momentum of participation, we have to create new platform of participation all the time.
Yes, but Golrokh, wait, a critical question.
Yeah.
But of course, okay, that may be true, that you can always, continue creating new actions and participations. But if let's say just like that, we have here posters of Iran in the 1980s, right? If somebody wants to study Egypt in 2000, the Egypt of 2011, right?
Yes.
30 years from now. Chances are that they won't be able to find those images that are very relevant, right? So already now, if you go just to Google, many of the images that are associated with the Iranian protests are becoming homogenized, right? So in that period, we were witnessing many, many different images, and as you say, different actions and uses of these images. But after a while, Google filters. And so you get only the same images again and again, and not the diversity online that existed at the time. So there, you must acknowledge that collecting from a specific period has a function, right?
Yeah, of course. But the only thing that I see is that the way that we have gathered things and collected things so far, maybe it's not really suitable for this huge participation of ordinary people in events, different events. And I only touched and saw this limitation. And for new possibilities, I'm still thinking. And for me, art is kind of tool to, especially my art projects, those projects which are not illustration or they are not really related to this kind of works. This is my main question, that how can we document participation without participation, actually.
Just to follow up on this question of how to document participation, we were talking earlier today about how images always have sort of a material and performative quality, especially when they're digital, or the digital objects are perhaps performative by nature. It seems to me like you're suggesting that in order to preserve your work, museums would have to somehow stage performances, or to have to stage activism, or to be a site of participation. So are you asking for a new role of museums? Do I hear you correctly?
Yeah, this is brilliant idea, but no, that was not my suggestion. But yeah, it's great to see that. But I think participation is not exactly an action. I don't see participation as an action. If we have same question here in Middle East and there in Europe about how we can document this history, for me this common thought also is kind of participation. But I use the word participation against observation, and I think institutions which created this ritual of observation, only observation, they don't have enough capacity for documenting participation, maybe. But I think creating common questions also is part of this process of documenting participation. I don't see only action like protest and performance and stage as a platform of participation.
Right. So we could document the debates we have. For example,
exactly.
We could write articles about the debates we are having right now, but we would need your images to do that, right? Alongside the texts.
Or film or use that.
So are there other questions? Do we still have time? Or 5 minutes? Golrokh, what about, for example, you're working together with artists who are quite known, for example, in the Netherlands. I saw a picture of Jonas Staal, the artist, who is working also in Iraq. And he had one of your drawings on the screen, big, blown up, full screen. So there are some overlappings between you and people who work for art institutions, right? So how do you see that?
Yeah, I think this is a bit exceptional because, as you know, Jonas is working about he's hardly working to make a bridge between art and politics, quite strong bridge. So he's an exception in, I think, at least in art scene that I experienced. But I think the reason that he ended up using my work also was this belief in participation. And what he does basically is to create that platform that we talked about. This
Okay, Golrokh, can you repeat that last bit? We didn't hear you.
felt this lack of
Golrokh, you're still
work.
there?
Also, was this following the question of
Hello. Maybe you
can
can.
you hear me?
We couldn't hear you for your last sentences. We couldn't hear them. Can you hear us now? No?
Yes.
Yes.
I said that I think the reason that he used my work. Yes.
Yes. Go on. We can hear you. No. It's not working. All right. We can just close.
I think it's working by some delay.
Yes. Okay, so it's okay. We had about 30 minutes. We can now close, and we're going to our next session. And I would like to thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And say hello to Tehran, and we hope to see you quick here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, same. Hello.